Hey y'all, Passport Bro Visuals, back at it with another one. And, you know, today's topic, I just want to get my thoughts out on, the Pan-African and pro-black, issue with that. It's mainly about Oshay Duke Jackson, and also a little bit about Tariq Nasheed, but more so, Oshay Duke Jackson, and how I don't think he's genuine for the people. I do think he's a grifter, and I do think, he's a scammer in, a lot of different ways. Personally, like similar with the whole reappeal content, how certain aspects of it, holds men back. And I think Pan-Africanism, as far as his brand of it, his way of thinking, especially with like ADOS and all that, it holds a lot of black people back, in my opinion. Shout out to Taharka Bey with all his great work, and especially his recent work on Oshay Duke Jackson and Tariq Nasheed and the whole FBA and ADOS thing, and all that. So, but starting off with Oshay Duke Jackson, a lot of the pro-black Pan-African space, I've noticed that a lot of them try to do this whole, thing where they, like you bring up like Malcolm X, a lot of them, I was thinking he was a corner street hustler, he was a pimp, like say, he went in prison, changed his life, got out, got with the nation, he left that, but, he was influential, to black people, and I think a lot of people try to use that motto to try to hide behind that motto to justify themselves in the space of Pan-African, slash, pro-blackness or whatever, and that starting with, I think, with Oshay. Oshay to me is a scammer. I don't think he's really genuine. I think he's more of a barbershop type of guy who's slightly a little bit more intellectual. But when he gets challenged by actual scholars and things like that, then he wants to, he can back down, and he won't really have any real strong points, because his points will be, basically, be disproven. And that's where a lot of people gravitate towards him, because they just don't want to hear the truth on certain things, So I found out with Oshay, there's a couple things. One, it was an article, and the other thing is on something called vdex.com. So I found out that Oshay, his name is Cornelius Jerome Dusher. He was in a court case in 2015 with the he sued the Louisiana nursing state board, and he sued them, and he tried to sue them so he can keep his license or get his license so he can practice nursing, and he was a nurse apparently in the state of Louisiana. And he lost the case. He was broke. The reason why is because they said that he didn't fully disclose everything, or he didn't show any points of why he should have his license to practice in Louisiana. He didn't disclose certain information. He said he had a DUI at one point or whatever. That was about it. But he lied about. He didn't say that he was in a domestic dispute with a woman, either a wife or a woman he was living with. And he also was charged with strangulation of the woman, and he was still in the woman's car, and he was evading police, and evading police. So he didn't say all that on his resume when he went to Louisiana, and he lost the case behind that. Now this is the math I'm looking at. It looked like this was in 2015, but when I was doing the math, it looks like the incident probably happened around 2009 or 2010, around that time. And then, like I said, because he lost it because his license was revoked in California behind this situation. So he already lost the license anyway. And that 2015 period, like I say, that actually coincides a lot with the birth of the whole Black Manosphere and all that sort of stuff. It actually comes together, per se, around that time. It comes together around that time with the Black Manosphere. So this must have happened around 2009, 2010. He loses the license, and he's doing whatever for those next 4 to 5 years. 4 years he goes to Louisiana. He had to be working as a nurse because he must have got it rejected at some point. So he had to been living there for a while for him to sue, or for a little while to sue, try to sue the Louisiana Nursing State Board. So he loses the case. He lost the appeal and all that. And right around the time, this is when the Black Manosphere comes into play, around that 2016, probably 2015, 2016 space. But he had to been, like I said, he had to been already having the viewpoints he has, towards black women and all that sort of stuff around that 2009, 2010 situation. Around an incident then, he had to have it, it had to been developing, per se, around that time. So I think with a lot of that, he just shows the grifting on his part. And I don't think that he's really genuine, because that proves the point that, for one, you were never a doctor in the first place, and you were barely a nurse at best, and you lost the license of a nurse, basically, off of some dumb shit that people don't, people can relate to it, but it definitely shows that you really are a simp, which explains why you're a trick, because you are a simp, and you're an emotional simp, and this, you had to still been in your 30s at this point. So that really speaks to how long you had been a simp, and how long you've been really tricking. You know what I'm saying? You probably was tricking kind of recently, in the last 10 years or so, but you've definitely been more of a simp the whole time. And that's what I think what it is with Oshay, And I don't think that he's, and then you talk about experience, people, you don't have people in the Black Pan-African space that have certain skill sets to talk about certain topics. So that's clearly you, because you can't talk anything medical, because it will expose the fact that, hey, you are, you were a nurse, you were never a doctor, but you were a nurse, and you fucked that up based off of, not so much the DI, but the whole domestic dispute thing, strangling a woman that you were with or whatever, stealing her car, and then being evasive with the police or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So that right there really shows that, Oshay Duke Jackson really is, no different than a lot of these other brothers. You know what I'm saying? He's more of a trick, I would say. He's definitely a simp, So that definitely proves that for me. But I think as far as for the space and what he's so-called representing, he's not really helping the space because of his way of thinking. His thinking, there's no real solutions to anything. You say, hey, the East Africans, they Muslim and all that sort of stuff, they're not going to see themselves as black. Yeah, because skin color is not a race. You didn't have to go to Africa to find out what we've been knew the whole time that white men tried to alter since they enslaved us. That, skin color is not a race. You didn't have to go there to find that out. So, that doesn't make any sense. Why you think it was so easy, to sell one another? unfortunately, you know what I'm saying? So that's what I think is the issue with him. Now, I also think would be his downfall is the more he pushes this FBA thing, you know. So, you know, because it doesn't make sense, because you're not really a businessman, you're a YouTuber, you know, more of a YouTuber. That's what you are. You're not really a businessman. So, my thing is, if you're so pro-black and that sort of stuff, and you're talking about the guy Agaba, you know, why are you tripping off of a brand deal with, a brand deal with Diageo, which is, again, it's not that you can't really do business with Europeans or whatever, but it's a European-based company out of London called Diageo, and you gave them nothing but free promotion every time you mention Diageo. But since you had this fallout with the Gaba, you ain't mentioned Diageo. You know what I'm saying? And that's what tells me. And then you're gonna go on there on your lives and talking all this BS, talking all the shit about him, Gaba. You know, it's like, hey, business people see that. People in Uganda see that. The business people, from Diageo or whatever, they may have seen the same thing. So you're really not a businessman. You don't really dress professional at all. So they looking at that and they seeing that for what it is. Like, hey, okay, yeah, we probably dodged a bullet, dealing with a guy like this. And if you so-called lost $250K, I mean, let's be honest, you probably really lost it off of just overspending and maybe some bad business moves, or maybe you paid more on the on that event or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But clearly you wanted Diageo to work. You want to get a brand deal with them. And quite frankly, if you think about it, you never had really any brand deal since you've been on YouTube. Now that I think about it, you never been a sponsor for any of these companies. But that just shows, like, hey, you with Diageo, like, you don't fit the brand of Diageo. You know what I'm saying? It's not that you're talking pro-black or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But you're just really divisive. And you're a person that misinforms a lot of people. And that's the same with the FBA thing. It's definitely misinforms a lot of people. Misinforms and causes more problems. Because, to the Africans, it's like in Uganda, well, you don't speak Swahili at all. You know what I'm saying? You don't speak Swahili, so granted, English is the second dominant language there. There in Kenya, which is why you're there in Kenya and Uganda, because they speak the English. But at the same time, you ain't learning to learn the Kenyan language. You ain't trying to learn Swahili in Uganda. Yeah. You don't think the business people there in Uganda who you want to work with, who may not necessarily want to work with you don't think they don't notice that? You don't think that the Diageo company from London wouldn't notice that? You don't think that they send people who know Swahili, you know what I'm saying, to Uganda to try to do business in Uganda? They're getting ready to leave in a couple of years out of Uganda as far as the market is concerned. But you don't think they would send people that knows Swahili? And that's the thing, Swahili is one of the most popular languages in Africa, for one, to know. And it's within reason, relatively one of the easiest languages to learn in Africa, Swahili. And part of it is partly Arabic, to be fair, because it has Arabic influence. So that just tells me you're really not really a businessman like you claim, like the guy Nana was saying, who's actually from Uganda. And I like him, but there's some things with him that's iffy, But at the same time, it's like he's from there, so he knows Swahili, but he's in America. He knows English. So what's your excuse for not knowing Swahili? And that tells me that you really aren't, that guy business-wise, and you're really just taking advantage of the people there, and the people know that because hey, you've been there all this time, like 6 years or whatever, potentially trying to stay here the rest of your life, or at least in Africa, but you're in Africa all this time, or Uganda, why you ain't learning Swahili all this time? You know, and people pick up on it. And in business, there's a lot of subtle, common sense things that people respect. You kind of sit there, your lives talking about, hey, this man, I'm busy, I ain't got time for this, I ain't got time for that, or whatever. Your fan base notices that, and particularly among your African fan base and even your African American fan base. Some we know that too, and may want to do business over there in Africa. But that's not a good look. You know what I'm saying? So it really shows that you're really not genuine and for the people per se, as you claim. And that's why you spoke up on the 19 Keys brother. 19 Keys. I know he's a scammer. I never liked 19 Keys at all, really, so much. But the fact that even 19 Keys can see and call out the whole FBA thing as problematic, and not just because it's problematic in relation to Africans in Africa, it's problematic to the whole diaspora, including us as African Americans. So for you to, say your talking points get disproven, then you want to flip the script and jump like that. That's why you lasted this long on YouTube. So for you to speak on 19 Keys, it really shows that you're jealous, and you can see the scammer for what it is, like yourself. That's why you're upset, because they seem to gravitate to them. They seem maybe trying to learn the language. You know what I'm saying? And hey, there's a lot of scammers too out there, in Africa. You can speak on that too, within reason. But it definitely tells me that's why you moved to Kenya, or at least doing your business in Kenya, like the guy Nana said. Your business license probably was denied out there in Uganda. You know what I'm saying? You got to start that process all over again. But you end up burning bridges that way faster all over Africa, because you're not going to be just jumping from country to country over there trying to, do this, family, trying to do this business thing, business connections and all that sort of stuff. But you're burning your bridges, I think, when you're not trying to really learn about the people. It gets very surface level. And I think that's, people pick up on that, regardless of language, and I think that's a big flaw of Oshay Duke Jackson. That's obviously a flaw with Tariq Nasheed. Tariq Nasheed, ironically, might be an agent in some ways, because it's still confusion in regards to him as far as his background, But like I said, with Oshay, like I said, that case coincides around the time of the start of the Black Manosphere. Also, I found this other article on there. Well, this article it sounds like it was about his father. It said his father was fighting his wife. You know what I'm saying? It was like Mortal Kombat. You know what I'm saying? So, obviously, it shows like your mother was probably abusive to your father. Fighting and cursing and all that sort of stuff. They were married for like 30 years or whatever. And it's pretty crazy, pretty dysfunctional. But yeah, I think that and also like I said, what's his name? Tahaka Bay. He showed that news clipping about his father, and he killed that guy back in 1972. You know what I'm saying? At a bar, when him and his friend were minors. They weren't supposed to be in there. They got kicked out. They got upset about it. Came in there, tried to fight the guy, and ended up stabbing the guy and killing him. Back in 72. Which this could explain a lot of the, why his father was involved in crack and all that at some point in the 80s. So, but I think that's what it is with that there, personally. Another thing too, you talk about, you mentioned, what's that guy's name? I forgot. But yeah, you just, you have to look at the logic of what, Oshay is talking about. Y'all was talking about the crack epidemic and all that sort of stuff, and, it was bad, it was rough, but hey, a lot of other blacks went through far worse and those some of those blacks are still living too. It ain't just the crack epidemic. It's other, it's earlier points in our history in America that was far worse. Then your daddy been a crackhead or something like that. So, just focusing on that, I think it's problematic. But I think the issue with him, Shay, is that I think he has a bone to pick with African Americans because a lot of them left, and he spoke about this too. A lot of them left in droves out of the pro-black space. In the 1990s, and I think he's upset with that. I think he's upset with that because he doesn't agree with it. I think he's trying to prove that, hey, we can do the Pan-African pro-black thing and it can work. And I think that's largely why he's in Africa to a certain extent. But yeah, I mean, whether it's a black Republican or a white or a black Democrat, they both don't like Bill Clinton. But hey, numbers are numbers. Bill Clinton, he brought us jobs. Most jobs ever, in the 1990s. That's in spite of the crime bill, the whole 3 strikes you out, which that was made by Biden. You know what I'm saying? The person brought the second most jobs to us, to be fair, was Obama. Under the recession and all that sort of stuff. But I think that, we actually critically think and actually do proper research and, read articles and listen to actual people of intellect, and people who actually know what they're talking about. I think that's I think that's where Oshay falls flat on. I think a lot of his listeners fall flat on that too because they want to believe in some of these fantasies and all that sort of stuff, and I think that's what's holding back the race. And he's comfortable with saying he's found this little niche where a lot of them would just listen to what he's saying, listen to the fantastical stuff, and that'll be that. I think that's what's I think that hurts us in the long run because we're not seeing the big picture and it's not really making us think logical. I know he comes off as logical, like he's trying to be logical, but that's what he's doing to pretend, to make it seem like what he's talking about is logical, but it's really illogical, and it's, messing it's messing us up a lot because it's misinforming a lot of us, and I think that's a big problem, with Oshay and his talking points, and I think this FBA thing is definitely going to be a big problem for the overall space of, Black Pan-African space or whatever. I think that's really going to be a problem, for us, as a group and as a race, the more you try to push this FBA thing because there is no value in it, and Tariq Abbey proved that, Tariq Nasheed does own the rights to FBA. He does own the name, and Oshay, has said he doesn't know. But when he say that he has said he doesn't, and then sometimes he say he don't know, because he knows the truth. If he fully commit to saying he don't know, he fully commit to saying that he doesn't own it, then he's gonna be trapped in a lie. That's why he try to leave it vague, but it's not vague. That Tariq Nasheed owns the title to FBA, and he's making money off it. And this whole thing is a grift. So if Tariq Nasheed said what he said about you, how did he see your grift? And mind you, this is like, 6 years ago, 5, 6 years ago. I'm wondering what it is that he know about Oshay. And I think that's what it is as far as the nursing thing, because you did lie, you didn't really go to medical school. You went to nursing school, you know what I'm saying? And you stopped as a nurse. And I think that's, like I said, you got caught with that DUI, you know what I'm saying? You strangled that woman that you was with or whatever. That's what the police reports say. You stole the woman's car, you know what I'm saying? And you tried to evade the police and all that, you know what I'm saying? In that situation. That's why he probably backed down, And I think that's really what it is, because it shows that you never know doctor didn't really go to medical school. You just went to nursing school. And that's what your father went to school for himself, for nursing, And I think that's really what it is when it comes to Oshay. I think that's the situation. But I think you try to hide behind this black education intellectual thing to make him seem smarter than what he really is, and to really show like he's for the people when he really isn't. So, but yeah, I think that's the biggest problem. But this FBA thing is definitely going to be a big, if it were to get any bigger, it'll definitely be a downfall, not just the black Pan-African YouTube space, but I think black people as a whole, what I'm saying? Because it's not realistic, it's too divisive, and it's too much separation, and I think it's just really just one acknowledgement and acceptance from white people. Ironically, despite what you're saying against them, But I think it really stems out of the last 60 years, in a sense, like what have we really achieved since integration? And I think we look at the black family structure, which is really the whole basis of it. What has that really become in the last, 61 years and all that? And what have we really done the last 50 years as a collective group? I.e. again, with more so leaning towards the black family unit per se. That's where a lot of this, more or less stems out of. So, but yeah, that's why I think that's why I think that's what the Pan-African thing really comes from that. So, but yeah, that's my thoughts on that. That's some of my thoughts on the topic. Keep you guys posted and everything. Still working on trying to, get those thumbnails and get the channel more up to date over time. So, get a chance, check out the video, and catch you guys next time.